the WBC belt that has included Ali, the greatest of all time. They are set and ready to answer who's the greatest of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
News! Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Top Rank's own Bruce Trampler took to Twitter to respond to some comments from Rick Glacier. And in so many words, what Bruce Trampler communicated is that Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter is a solid fight, but nobody has offered anything to either guy. Can't imagine it taking place without paying customers to provide an upside in their purses. So, we're several months from proposing it. You know, I saw this, and I had to ask Bruce, Mr. Trampler, then why is Sean saying he rejected Top Rank's $2 million proposal? He left some lengthy statements in reference to that figure, to which Bruce replied, I honestly have no idea. You'd have to ask Sean. I can only speak for Top Rank Boxing, and no offers were made.
Then what the hell is it that Sean rejected?
What $2 million offer was Sean Porter referring to? What the hell was he talking about?
Make it make sense, because right now it doesn't.
I'll tell you what I think. What I think the journos have been writing about are the preliminary stages of negotiations. There's nothing on paper. Contracts and term sheets are not being drawn up and sent out. We're not there yet.
So what is it that Sean rejected?
Because it was Sean Porter himself, that simply said he's rejecting Top Rank's $2 million. That kind of a figure is an insult to him, and that for them to open up with that figure...
Open up what?
Open up a dialogue to start the conversation that is intended to get the ball rolling. I think that's what Sean Porter was talking about. I think that's what he was getting at. But these conversations are happening in the absence of contracts and term sheets being drawn up and sent out. And these conversations are happening in full view of the public eye by way of the boxing media, the pundits, the vloggers. Essentially, what I think Sean Porter was addressing was a set of sound bites from Bob Arum.
Sean Porter himself said he told his father, Kenny, to make the fight happen.
He said that's the fight he wants to have. He needs that fight for his legacy. That came from Sean. The proposition of the fight happened.
That bit of it.
That came from Bob. That came from Bob Arum.
These guys are having an open dialogue in front of everybody.
But as far as the meat and potatoes of it, the bones, to make the fight happen, well, we're not there yet. At least not based on what Bruce Trampler is saying, because Bruce Trampler, in so many words, is saying no actual offers have gone out. And that much, that bit of it, he can confirm.
So where are we with the fight?
The same place we've always been. Nowhere. Oh. You know, things were looking encouraging there for a minute. Like maybe the fight could actually materialize in the near future, as there seemed to be willingness to make it on both sides. You know, Sean says he wants it, and Bob's talking about the fight, talking about making it.
He was.
Things were looking promising, though that didn't last very long, as it didn't take very long for Sean Porter to make these public statements that he's rejecting Top Rank's $2 million offer.
And this just compounds it.
Because what Bruce Trampler is saying in so many words is that no actual offers have gone out, and with no actual offers going out, well, that can't possibly mean we're close to the fight happening, now can it? Here on the channel, we've been discussing Sean Porter's comments in reference to a particular figure for the last 1 or 2 days. And those comments are Sean's comments, so something's going on. There's some kind of a dialogue happening. But you see what else Bruce Trampler said. That they are months out from that kind of a proposal, because until the crowds come back...
That fight's not happening.
And those are his words, not mine. I maintain my original position.
About the whole thing.
Based on what comments have been floating around. Comments from Bob Arum, comments from Sean Porter. I stand by my original position that if the people at Top Rank are willing to give Sean Porter $2 million guaranteed, perhaps a pay-per-view upside for a world title shot, a world title opportunity, if this is an offer that they are willing to entertain, then it is an offer that Sean Porter should also be willing to entertain, because he's not a world champion, and he doesn't have that many options. That's if the story checks out. In other news, I'm sure most of you have heard by now that the weight limit for Adrian Broner's comeback fight versus Giovanni Santiago on Saturday night has reportedly now been changed from super lightweight, 140 pounds, to welterweight, 147 pounds. The weigh-in is tomorrow, according to Boxing Scene, and this is the exact same thing that happened ahead of the Adrian Granados fight of 2017. At the last minute, the contracted weight of the match was changed.
Yeah, because Broner couldn't make the fucking weight.
In the build-up of this Giovanni Santiago fight, all we've been hearing is how Adrian Broner has finally had a breakthrough. He's had an epiphany, you know? He's woken up and he's going to take his career seriously. I never bought into any of that bullshit.
Did you?
As far as I was concerned, that was just a vain attempt to try to get people to, once again, pay attention to Adrian Broner and all of his hijinks. At a time when Adrian Broner is so obviously in a bad way financially. He owed a lot of people a lot of money. He had to stand up in court in so many words. He told everybody he's a fraud and he's broke.
So what a coinky dink that he gets a fight for.
What a coincidence that Adrian Broner, who said not that long ago that he's walking away from the sport of boxing to focus on his music career, once again finds himself entering into the squared circle at a time when he's reported to have all kinds of money problems. Thus, when that is the motivation for the fighter to climb back into that squared circle, what kind of performance are you expecting to see?
I mean, really?
That guy's not there because he wants to be there. He's there because he has to be.
I don't even know why I'm talking about this fucking fight, because I wasn't going to watch it anyway.
If there's any card taking place this Saturday night that I'm going to be tuning into, it is the Miguel Berchelt versus Oscar Valdez fight taking place on ESPN by way of Top Rank.
That's it.
I was going to maybe drop in on Otto Valine versus Dominic Breazeale to see what happens with that fight and how does Otto look moving forward.
Good or bad.
But that aside, I had no interest in Broner versus Santiago. I have no interest, not even a fleeting one, in what remains of Adrian Broner's career. As far as I'm concerned, all they're doing is fattening up that guy for somebody. Maybe Regis Pregarius, maybe Keith Thurman, maybe Danny Garcia, I don't know. But at this point, Adrian Broner is little more than just a familiar punching bag, climbing into the squared circle not due to his ambitions as an athlete, but due to his money troubles as a fuck-up.
And a man-child.
Who has modeled his entire persona, his entire being,
after someone else.
After a fighter that has a much more serious work ethic than himself, a much more esteemed professional who took it quite seriously. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Floyd Mayweather.
Big bro.
I can't tell you how many times I cringed inside watching Adrian Broner refer to Floyd Mayweather as such.
Sickening.
Well, I gotta tell you, even if this news hadn't broke, even if the contracted weight for the match hadn't been changed at the last minute, I still wasn't gonna fucking watch this thing.
I don't give a fuck about Adrian Broner.
I told you, I just don't view that guy as a boxer. I view him as a parody of a boxer. A bad joke.
How much money have they frittered away on Adrian Broner?
That could have went into developing the PBC's own female stable of fighters, comprised of talented girls like Alicia Baumgartner, Tiara Brown, Melissa St. Ville, what have you. How much money have they frittered away on AB to go in there time and time again, miss the weight, underperform, and come back and do it all again? How much money?
Showtime is more invested in AB than they were in Clarissa Shields.
So it's for this reason I got no respect for that guy. And I don't care what he's doing. If this development is an indicator of anything, is that with AB, what you see is what you get, and it's what you're going to continue to get until the sport of boxing retires him, as he is not at liberty to retire from it. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Deontay Wilder has confirmed that Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz Jr., as well as Tyson Fury, are fights he wants in the remainder of his career. The ones at the top who I haven't fought, haven't got my hands on. That's what I want. I want to clean the division out.
Okay.
Per Marcus Watson. And, we've been talking a lot about Deontay Wilder here on the channel last couple of days, last couple of weeks, as he's given us that much more to talk about, though the talking points, they do remain familiar, don't they?
They do.
In order for that to happen, Deontay Wilder has to align himself for a fight with an Anthony Joshua or a Tyson Fury. An Andy Ruiz Jr. fight is a little bit more feasible than those fights are, but what needs to happen before we come to that is Wilder has to make his comeback. It's been 12 months since Deontay Wilder had a fight, and I hardly think they're going to put him in there with Andy Ruiz Jr. straight away. We know what the plan for Andy is. Andy's supposed to be fighting Chris Arreola this spring. But who's Wilder supposed to be fighting?
The longer it takes him to come back, the more it hurts him.
I've no doubts that Deontay Wilder wants to get paid a certain way upon his ring return, if he returns at all. But I've no doubts that he wants to get paid a certain way. He's got certain dollar amounts in mind, and the availability of those dollar amounts in the absence of capacity crowds, given what's still going on everywhere around the world, that in unison with the viability of certain opponent options that, there's only so many guys you can put in there with Deontay Wilder and have a successful pay-per-view as a result.
Andy Ruiz is one, but he's busy.
Dillian White is another, though that would require Deontay Wilder to travel across the Atlantic Ocean, visit our friends across the pond, where the fight, I've no doubts, could do considerable business. As a pay-per-view, I think Eddie Hearn and the people over there at Matchroom and Sky Sports would pay handsomely to see that fight come into fruition. But once again, that would require of Deontay to fight Dillian the same thing it would require him in order to fight Andy, and that is, he needs a comeback fight. It's been 12 months since Deontay Wilder locked horns with anybody.
He needs to get it together.
I mean, there's no way you can broach the subject of Deontay Wilder here today in 2021 and not address the mental stability or instability of this fighter. We don't know that this guy is psychologically ready to be fighting with anyone. He doesn't seem to have moved on from the Tyson Fury fights, the Tyson Fury saga, even though Tyson Fury himself, he has.
A lot of people think Wilder's lost his fucking mind.
I think Wilder's biggest problem the last couple of years has been that he just doesn't want to be realistic with himself. He doesn't want to be realistic about reality.
No.
His ring return could do very well on regular television. It could garner a lot of viewership. Viewership in the millions. I happen to think that depending on who he fights and depending on where it takes place, like perhaps, say, a Fox as opposed to a Showtime, Wilder's ring return could be an event to some people, in some circles, and that's what he needs. But if he's gonna get all hung up over the price tag, if he wants to act like everything's hunky-fucking-dory out there, like everything's normal, and certain dollar amounts are still available, if he still wants to get paid a certain way, and that's what he's hung up on, then he's just going to make his hiatus from boxing, he's going to make it that much longer. Because it seems to me like what Wilder might be waiting for is for the capacity crowds to come back and for things to go back to normal, and that may not happen for some time.
They were staging fights in front of crowds in the state of Texas, but look at the state of Texas now.
Look at the state that it's in. They're in the middle of a fucking blizzard and a massive power outage. There's very little out there in terms of stability. So if the focus is getting Wilder back in the swing of things, then certain sacrifices have to be made.
And he's not going to be cleaning out any weight classes until they are made.
Quotes, the statements, the sound bites, they're all very useful for YouTubers like myself to make some coin and give us all something to converse about, but ultimately,
Wilder's got to stop talking and start doing.
He likely won't be able to fight the winner of Joshua versus Fury for another, 18, 24 months?
Could take that long.
Deontay Wilder's not the mandatory to any alphabet title in the heavyweight division, and until he gets moving, he won't be. And finally, some rumors are swirling in reference to
Tank Davis.
what the immediate future holds for Gervonta Davis, and the rumors are being fueled by Gervonta Davis himself, who took to Twitter to drop hints as to who it is he's going to be fighting next. He was asked for a hint, and Gervonta Davis said he's a world champion. When asked whether he'd be fighting his very next fight at either 130 or 135 pounds, Gervonta Davis responded by saying neither.
So what, he's cutting down to 126?
It's not likely. He's had enough struggles trying to make 130. The rumor is that he's supposed to be going to 140 pounds. But if he were to go to 140 pounds, there are only two active reigning full-fledged world champions at that weight, Jose Ramirez and Josh Taylor, and I don't think that Gervonta Davis is going to be fighting either of them, as they're supposed to be fighting each other. And the politics of boxing, as we all know, would pose some issues since both of those guys are top-ranked fighters. And we all know what side of the street Gervonta Davis is
The
on.
rumor is he's fighting unbeaten WBA regular champion Mario Barrios.
Who holds the WBA regular title at 140 pounds. He holds the lesser title of Josh Taylor's full-fledged WBA title.
Kid's about 5 foot 10, 71-inch wingspan.
The professional record of 26 wins, no losses, with 17 knockouts.
Kid fought on the undercard of Davis versus Santa Cruz.
Scored a 6th-round knockout over Ryan Carl on that undercard. I'm going to be honest, I don't know how much stock I have in this rumor. I don't really know if I can believe it. Seems almost a little bit too counterintuitive that Gervonta Davis would go all the way up there to 140 pounds when there are much more winnable fights right there at 130. Mario Barrios is a big kid as far as 140 pounders go. 5'10", those are generous dimensions, the kind of dimensions that could see this fighter one day moving up into the welterweight division. Pretty hefty knockout percentage as well.
I don't know that they'd let Gervonta fight this kid.
What, at 140 pounds? Let me tell you something. Gervonta Davis might pack a punch at 130, but that power wanes the further up he goes. We saw that in the Gamboa fight. He hit that guy with a lot of clean shots, and Gamboa collected himself enough times to see the 12th round.
I don't know if I can believe this rumor.
But at the same time, Gervonta Davis is lending credence to it with his very cryptic tweets that indicate his next fight won't be at 130 and it won't be at 135. I don't think that this kid can cut down to make 126. So the inference we can make is that he's going to move up to 140?
I don't know.
We all know that there's been a proliferation of baby belts, trinket titles, lesser titles over there on PBC Island. And it just so happens that Mario Barrios does have one of his own. That would explain why Gervonta Davis is classifying his next opponent option, as a quote-unquote world champion.
That's what they're calling those guys these days.
But for going up there and fighting Mario fucking Barrios for a baby belt at 140 pounds, where Gervonta Davis is a little more than just a tree stump, why not take on the winner of Burchelt versus Valdez? Why not take on the winner of Herring versus Frampton? Why not take up Jojo Diaz on his offer? He wants to fight you.
Gervonta would be the A-side in all of those fights.
If the fight is at 130 pounds, Gervonta Davis would be a full-fledged world champion. He's in possession of the full-fledged version of the title there.
You're telling me they're going to send him to 140 to fight some kid, some big kid that nobody knows?
Am I hearing this right? Am I supposed to believe this? I'll tell you what I think. I don't expect to see Gervonta Davis back in action anytime in the near future. I don't expect to see him anytime soon.
And I don't know if it's going to be this kid.
I don't know if it's going to be somebody else. But that being said, without an actual time frame for all of this to happen, there's plenty of time for this news to change.